The Honorable the Deputy Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, the Honorable Major General, retired Edmund Dillon, MP, member for Point Fortin, has requested leave of absence from the sittings of the House during the period November 19th to the 25th, 2018. Mr. David Lee, MP, member for Pointe-à-Pierre, and Mr. Barry Bhoendradatt, MP, member for Princestown, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, correspondence has been received from the Vice President of the Senate dated November 20th, 2018, which states as follows. Dear Honorable Speaker, change of membership to the Joint Select Committees. I wish to inform you that at a sitting held on Tuesday, November 20th, 2018, the Senate agreed to the following resolution. Resolved that the Senate agree to the appointment of Mr. Paul Richards in lieu of Dr. Daneshwar Mahabir on the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. Accordingly, I respectfully request that the House of Representatives be informed of this decision in the earliest convenience. Please, yours respectfully, Nigel Lefetras, Vice President of the Senate. Condolences on the passing of former Member of Parliament and former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dr. Rupert Griffith. Honorable members, as you may... Honorable members, excuse me, AG, I'm hearing little overtones. Honorable members, as you may be aware, one of our former members of Parliament, Dr. Rupert Griffith, passed away on Wednesday, November 21st, 2018. Dr. Griffith served on several occasions as a member in this House, which included his tenure as Deputy Speaker and Speaker of the House of Representatives. As we mourn his passing, we also honor his legacy. I now invite honorable members to pay their respective tributes to Dr. Griffith. Honorable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Today, I bring condolences on behalf of the government on the passing of Dr. Rupert Griffith. Within this year alone, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have been rocked with a number of our noteworthy citizens departing this life. But we must always ensure to acknowledge the contributions they have made and celebrate the life they have lived. Today, as I celebrate the public service career of Dr. Griffith, it would be remiss of me to stand in this House and not also offer condolences on behalf of the people of Arima, whom Dr. Griffith served before me. A career that spanned over 2 decades, having had some noteworthy happenings during that time. Dr. Griffith offered his energy, skills, talent, and expertise to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago well. Joining the People's National Movement and ascending to Member of Parliament for Arima, Dr. Griffith used his position as a launching pad for his political career. During his time as a member of the PNM, he served in capacities such as Deputy Speaker, Opposition Member, Independent Member, and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. When Dr. Griffith crossed the floor in 1997, he joined the United National Congress, UNC. He went on to hold portfolios such as Minister of Information, Communications, Training and Distant Learning, Speaker of the House, Minister of Tourism, Minister of Sport, and Minister of Science and Technology. A wealth of experiences that he used his training as evidenced by a master's degree in career and industrial technology education and his PhD in educational administration and supervision to supplement and support the governments of this country. We will always remember the moment in our political history when crossing the floor from the PNM to the UNC in Dr. Griffith gave latter control to the government after 1772 results, thus I would say etching his name in our history books forever. The people of Toco Sangre Grande were also fortunate to have been represented by Dr. Griffith, and I know that my colleague, Mrs. Jennings-Smith, will ensure that the people of that constituency will be well taken care of. The one thing I can say that brings me comfort, and I would hope brings comfort to his family at this time, is the way in which his political experiences have not detracted from the memory of whom he was as a person, one that, no matter which side of the floor he sat, was committed to serve. Interestingly, just a few days ago, his nephew visited me at my home to inform me that Dr. Griffith was not doing well, and that it seemed as though his demise was imminent. He reached out to me to ask if I could include him in my prayers, as he knew of the good relationship we shared, not only as residents of Arima, but both of us having an interest in the education of young people. Dr. Griffith had the responsibility in his portfolio as Minister of Information, Communications, Training, and Distance Learning for YTEP, when I served as a member of the board, and we shared many amicable relationships since then. For all of us, the time will come and someone will be offering similar remarks on our behalf. The question now becomes, what is the legacy that will be left? How will we be remembered? Dr. Griffith has left a legacy of service and willingness. Today we offer our thanks for the work that was done and his contributions to Trinidad and Tobago. To his family, it is hoped that the positives of his memory will comfort you through this difficult time. Thank you.
Chief Whip, Member for Tabakit.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the United National Congress, my parliamentary colleagues, and the membership and supporters of the UNC, I rise to pay tribute to a most worthy citizen of our country, the late Dr. Rupert Griffith, and at the same time extend our collective condolences to his family. May God grant them courage in their time of loss and grief. Today, in our tribute, we hope to celebrate the life and contribution that Dr. Rupert Griffith made to his country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, a life in public service is one of commitment, dedication, and personal sacrifice. Dr. Griffith dedicated much of his life to the service of Trinidad and Tobago. Public service is selfless service, in which one utilizes the positional authority and power to make better the lives of others and to advance the cause of the nation. Dr. Griffith was motivated by this vision and lived the values of a servant of the people. Whether as Member of Parliament, Minister of Government, or in the exalted position of Speaker of the House, Dr. Griffith carried out his functions with fairness and equity. Despite his academic achievements and the several positions of status which he occupied, he remained a humble and polite individual, committed to fostering harmony and resolving problems to the satisfaction of all concerned. He represented the values of humility and never bore grudges nor considered others as enemies. However, he was intolerant of exploitation and chastised self-serving behaviors. In fact, he was never afraid to speak his mind or provide constructive criticism. Where he disagreed, he did so in a supportive fashion. It is qualities like these which endeared him to people and indeed our cabinet. It is not surprising, therefore, that he was able to transcend political parties, winning elections as both PNM and People's Partnership. To have achieved this means that people saw him as a principled person and chose to follow principles, the principles and values for which he stood. There is hardly a public official, particularly a member of parliament or a minister of government, who will be liked by all. Dr. Griffith, like all of us in this house, also had his detractors and opponents. However, a remarkable quality of his was that he always sought to understand the motivation that gave rise to their behaviors, and in so doing, generally avoided confrontational behavior. But when called upon to confront behaviors, decisions or policies which he felt were anti-people or regressive, he fought hard. As a minister and MP, he was particularly distressed when he could not deliver to his constituents, and especially so to poor people. Indeed, as Member of Parliament for Toko Sani Grande under the People's Partnership, he was confronted by poverty and neglect, by unemployment among youths, and he worked diligently to bring relief to people. Dr. Griffith also added great value to the country by implementing programs to develop people and improve our global competitiveness. We are all proud to have him serve as a member of the cabinet and thank him once again for the support he gave to the administration of Kamla Prasad Bisesa, as well as the creativity and innovations he brought to his ministry. It is said that the gift of a human birth is the most valuable gift which any person can be blessed with. What is more important, though, is what we choose to do with this gift. Dr. Griffith chose to use his gift of a human body with the capacity for intelligent choice to serve his fellow citizens. In a sense, this is not surprising because he was spiritually focused, a trait which made him see every human being as a human being first, as an equal person, and it also inspired his selfless service. Today, I wish to put on record our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Rupert Griffith and his family for their great contribution to our society, for they too shared and supported what he did for this society. May God therefore bless him with the rewards due to him for his contribution. And may his wife Sandra Ray Griffith and his 3 children find comfort in the knowledge that he, by his existence and time on this earth, empowered many a life. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, I too would like to pay tribute to Dr. Rupert Griffith. A former member of this House, Dr. Griffith had a PhD in Education Administration and Supervision and a master's degree in Career and Industrial Technology Education, and brought his knowledge and expertise to the many portfolios he held during his parliamentary tenure. Outside of the Parliament, Dr. Griffith provided sponsorship to many community groups, sporting clubs, and steel pan organizations. We will forever be grateful for his many contributions in this House. Dr. Rupert Griffith will not only be remembered as a politician, but also as a husband, father, friend, and colleague. I take this opportunity to express my deepest condolences to the Griffith family during this time of mourning, and I pray that Almighty grants them the comfort and strength needed in this time of bereavement. I now ask that we stand and observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable members, an appropriate letter will be sent to convey our condolences to the wife and family of the late Dr. Rupert Griffith.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. 1. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statement of the Samuel Laventil Regional Corporation for the year ended September 30th, 2008. 2 to 3. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Samoa Regional Corporation for the years ended September 30th, 2009 and 2010. 4 to 5. The audited financial statements of CLICO Investment Fund for the financial years ended December 31st, 2016 and 2017. 6. The consolidated audited financial statements of Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited for the financial year ended September 30th, 2017. I beg to move that papers 1 to 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and papers 4 to 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 1 to 3 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and papers 4 and 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have the honor to lay the annual report of the Legal Aid and Advice Authority for fiscal year 2013 and 2014. Apologies.
Minister of Public Administration.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay the annual report of the Statutory Authorities Service Commission for the period October the 1st, 2016 to September 30th, 2017.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 9, the ministerial response of the Office of the Prime Minister to the 8th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity on an examination of the perceived inequality faced by single fathers in Trinidad and Tobago with specific focus on custody matters, policies and access to programs and services. Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Leader of the House for the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 10, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation vesting amendment to the first schedule order 2018, paper number 11, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation vesting amendment to the first schedule number 2 order 2018. Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Reports from committees.
Member for Toko, Sandy Grandi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to present the 6th report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, 4th session, 2018 to 2019, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the mental health and wellness services and facilities in Trinidad and Tobago.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, in light of the pending closure of Petrotrin, could the Minister inform the House what will be the status of the Augustus Long Hospital as of December 1st, 2018?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as is now well known, transition to the new organizational structure will be effective the 1st of December 2018. On that date, all operations at Petrotrin's medical facilities will be terminated. The company has introduced a new medical plan, which is being rolled out next week, and various meeting dates with pensioners and employees have been published in the newspaper today. With regards to the Augustus Long facilities specifically, RFPs are to be invited in January of 2019 for lease or sale of the property.
Member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Minister, in the interim, can you give us an idea of what steps will be taken to protect the plant and equipment that will remain idle from December 1st?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Well, there's security arrangement and there's infrastructure in place to protect all plants at Point-à-Pied, including the refinery, which is being mothballed as we speak, and also the bungalows, and obviously including the Augustus Long facility.
Member for Tabakit.
Yes, sir. Is it true that the plan that is being put in place is a plan with Sagicor for 2 years? And what happens after those 2 years to the persons who would have been entitled if Augustus Long had stayed for treatment through life?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
It is true that a plan has been worked out with Sagicor through RFPs, and it was a public tender for 2 years, after which it will be further rolled over or reevaluated, but a medical plan will continue for retirees post the 2 year.
Members, according to the standing orders, only 2 supplemental questions are allowed, and 2 have been asked and answered. Question number 2, member for Oropouche West. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the member for Oropouche West, with regard to reports indicating that the Tulsa Trace floodgates are dysfunctional and contributed to the massive devastation to both livestock and properties, could the minister indicate when urgent repair works will be commenced on these same floodgates?
Leader of the House for Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Tulsa Trace Gates is a 7-flap gate system built by the Ministry of Agriculture for irrigation purposes on the Cora River. They were originally designed for the prevention of salt water intrusion into inland areas. These have not been functional for a very long period of time and have been earmarked for removal by the Ministry of Agriculture. However, in the interim, the flaps of the gate system were removed and they are causing no restriction to the flow of the water. Over the weekend of 16th to 18th November 2018, the flooding at Tulsa Trace area and the surrounding areas was not as a result of malfunctioning gates, but as a result of the extreme rainfall event. The runoff was beyond the regular storage of the currently existing watercourses. Thank you very kindly.
Supplemental, member for Tabaki.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to place the following supplemental. The Honourable Minister said that the gates were originally placed there to avoid salt water coming into the agricultural areas. Now that the Minister is announcing that the gates are to be removed, does this mean that the agricultural areas and fields will now be subject to salt water? And what will that mean for crop production?
Leader of the House, are you in a position?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it would mean that the gates will be removed and replaced by a system that will ensure that we continue to ensure that salt water does not intrude into the agricultural areas. But the gates, as I said, have not been functioning for quite some time, and it means that they need to be removed and replaced.
Question number 3, member for Naparima.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, in the light of the fact that several citizens have been dislocated through demolition action to their respective properties, could the Minister state which state agency authorized the demolition of these homes in Santa Flora?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the lands in question is owned by Trinto Peck and is being managed by PSAEL, the Paliseco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. The board of Trinto Peck gave instructions for the demolition for the following reasons. 1, the structures are located in La Victoria Trace in Santa Flora, all within an oil-producing area within the setback distance, which means that those structures are perilously close to producing oil wells. 3 out of 9 structures have been demolished after the owners were served notice for almost a year and did not comply. We were left with no other choice but to effect the law and the demolition.
Supplemental, Naparima.
Did the state agency act on its own, or was it subject to ministerial or cabinet review?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Obviously, an action like that does not need ministerial nor cabinet approval.
Supplemental, Naparima.
Could the minister state why the decision was taken to demolish just before the celebration of the birth of Christ?
Member, I will not entertain that question. Members, I have ruled. Question number 4. I recognize the member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of National Security, could the Minister state what urgent matter?
Faizabad. Members, I need to hear the question. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of National Security, could the Minister state what urgent measures are in place at the Forensic Science Center to facilitate autopsies in light of the report that the pathologist, Dr. Yvonne Devines, is on 6 weeks vacation?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there was no need to put any urgent measure in place. As is known, and I'm sure as is known by the member for Faizabad, Dr. Boris has been granted an extension of her contract as a forensic pathologist, and she is on call and on duty. What happened is, unfortunately, she had a pre-scheduled procedure yesterday and today, and she was not able to be there to do the work whilst Dr. Devines was on leave.
Member for Faizabad, supplemental.
Minister, can you indicate to us at this point in time how many bodies are currently awaiting autopsy at the Forensic Science Center?
Minister of National Security, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't have that information available. I'm sure that it can be made available.
Supplemental, Tabaki.
Would the Minister kindly tell us what has been done within the last 12 months following announcements made by the government that they were going to increase the number of pathologists? What has been done to recruit new pathologists and add to the bank of pathologists available at Forensic Science Center?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have engaged the UNDP, and they have a program where they internationally seek forensic pathologists. That process is ongoing. We've made the initial down payment to be able to access this plan. As a cabinet, what we had also done is look at the granting of scholarships, and in particular scholarships offered by the United Kingdom in the field of forensic pathology, and we have asked for that to be done as well. And the United States.
Member, thank you. Member for Bataria Sanwan, question number 5.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, could the Minister indicate what urgent steps have been taken to avert the abuse of senior citizens at the homes for the elderly?
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Ministry continues its ongoing public awareness initiatives aimed at building a heightened awareness as well as encouraging attitudes and behaviors consistent with respect for, protection of, and the advancement of the human rights of our senior citizens. The Ministry has always also established an Older Persons Information Center. This center provides all information relevant to older persons in Trinidad and Tobago, and it also receives complaints of abuse on older persons. The Inspectorate Division of the Division of Aging is responsible for investigating all reports of elder abuse, both at geriatric homes and private residences, and this is with respect to whether it's physical, psychological, or financial abuse, and action is taken to resolve those issues. This is oftentimes involves a collaboration with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Ministry of Health. The Ministry is also seeking to expedite the proclamation of the Homes for Older Persons Act 2007, as this act will provide for the licensing, regulation, and control of homes for older persons. And we are working with a time frame of June 2019. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Supplemental, Barataria Sanwan.
Minister, I know it might be a little difficult, but how many of these homes have been investigated and any penalty given to these homes as of to date?
Minister of Social Development.
Over the last 12 months or so, we would have investigated abuse at 30 geriatric homes and 40 private residences. We would have taken action to remove some persons, and other matters would have been reported to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Services. As it stands now, the Ministry doesn't have the authority to take action against these homes.
Supplemental, Barataria Sanwan.
Last one, Minister, would you be considering a cabinet note for early drafting to take, so the Ministry will be able to take action and penalize these homes that are abusing the elderly citizens?
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a Homes for Older Persons Act 2007. The act remains to be proclaimed. We are working with a deadline of June 2019. Once that act is proclaimed, we will then be able to take relevant action.
Questions on notice. Questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we'll be answering all questions on notice.
Member for, well, Leader of the House. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Question number 1 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, over the past 5 years plus, there's been an increased level of gun violence and in the committal of robberies and home invasions. The increase in these gun-related offenses is due to a number of factors, including the previously porous state of our borders. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and other law enforcement arms are working on a number of intelligence-driven initiatives to retrieve illegal firearms and reduce the circulation of same. This is combined with efforts being made to secure our borders, thereby reducing the potential for illegal firearms coming in the country. Specific intelligence-driven operations aimed at locating and reducing the availability of illegal firearms for use in criminal activity are being implemented at this time and would include, inter alia, the use of provisions of the anti-gang legislation. Recent finds of illegal arms and narcotics are an indication of the effectiveness of the implementation of these plans. The recent launch of the Emergency Response Unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is another initiative aimed at increasing police presence, making the police more visible, and ensuring that the police are able to respond to reports of criminal activity in a quicker time, which should assist in reducing the incidence of criminals committing these gun-related offenses, and when they do, lead to a higher likelihood of their apprehension.
Supplemental, Member for Tabaki.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Minister, you made reference in your answer to the porous borders. And earlier you had admitted that there are a number of fast patrol boats, almost 19, that are not serviceable at the moment, 14 of which you are trying to service. What has been done since that announcement, which was about 6 weeks ago to now, to even put in place some of those fast patrol boats in the areas where we know, and it's generally known by the people, that guns are coming into the country?
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what has taken place in the last 2 weeks is we've actually located one of the fast patrol vessels in the southwestern peninsula, and that vessel has actually been patrolling and prevented the incursion of a number of illegal immigrants even before they reach the shores. On the north coast, we had also put a vessel there and have also stopped a number of incursions on the north coast. Whilst the Coast Guard has been doing this, they've been working along with the TTPS and immigration, and we've increased the number of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service patrols in areas which intelligence suggests are places where illegal immigrants were landing. And there's actually been the apprehension, I would say, of between, I think the figures are between 50 to 70 illegal immigrants on shore, and we've prevented a number from getting there. So the borders have actually been hardened up over the last 2-week period.
Supplemental, Carney East.
Honourable Minister, would you be kind enough to give an idea about how many possible entry points are there when you said that you're looking at the borders around Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister of National Security.
It is well known that they're both legal entry points and illegal entry points. The illegal entry points, I think, number, when they've done a study of the coastline, that is a study done many years ago, it's about 190. How much was it? 214 is the last, but that's between Trinidad and Tobago. No, there was a deal.
I recognize Shagona Cease.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Could the Honourable Minister state how many guns have been intercepted upon entering the country and the source, where did they come from? Where did you find them from?
Minister of National Security.
Those statistics have been released by Trinidad and Tobago Police Service over a period of time. They actually do tally them. I don't have that figure here today. And the source seems to be from a number of different countries. For example, some of the firearms seem to be coming from the North American market and some from the South American market. But it is also something we're working with our international partners on tracing.
Supplemental, Carney East.
Honourable Minister, in the detection of the source of the firearms, Minister, in the detection of the source of the firearms, has there been any additional work done at the Forensic Science Center to help you in this analysis?
Minister of National Security.
The Forensic Science Center does have a backlog, so what has been used is the armorer at the police academy to assist with some of them. There's also a special unit set up that has the connections with the international partners like the United States, the ATF in the United States, etc., that assist with the tracing of these firearms.
Question number 2, Member for Chief Whip, Orupuch West.
Question number 2 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Commissioner of Police has reported that within the last 2 months, the 5 reporting kidnappings, including those that were deemed fake, have all been returned safely with no ransom being paid. Notwithstanding this, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has not classified these incidents as an upsurge in kidnappings of either men or women. Specific emphasis is being given to the missing persons cases, and intelligence-driven investigations are ongoing. With respect to a number of the missing persons reports, what is not being extensively reported to the public is that quite a few of these alleged missing persons are being found having left home and running off to get away from certain circumstances or to spend time with persons surreptitiously. Many of these matters result in the use of significant state resources to locate the individuals. Thankfully, in the vast majority of the cases, the missing persons are either found or turn up unharmed. We are concerned about any crimes committed against our females. The TTPS continues to treat all kidnappings and missing persons, both male and female, with the highest level of priority and does not discriminate against one gender or the other. In the cases of kidnappings and missing persons, the TTPS, through its anti-kidnapping unit, provides specific assistance to the families of missing persons, including kidnappings, for the duration and following the incidents. In the case of violent crimes against women, particularly domestic violence, I am very concerned about same and advise that the TTPS has clear procedures that guides its approach to addressing any type of violence, domestic violence situation. Additionally, the Domestic Violence Procedural Manual, as well as Standing Order number 53, Domestic Violence Procedures, provide step-by-step guidelines on the approaches. Finally, the TTPS has intensified the training of officers with an aim of better equipping them to handle all cases, including those of domestic violence.
Recognized member for Caroni East.
Honorable Minister, could you, if you happen to have the information, indicate how many citizens are missing for 2018 and how many have been unaccounted for?
Minister of National Security.
I'd be pleased to provide that. I don't have those statistics here.
Member for Tabakit. Okay. Question number 3.
Question number
West, Chief Whip.
Question number 3 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Ministry of National Security, through the coordination of its divisions and agencies, in particular, the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Immigration Division, and the Strategic Services Agency, continues to work assiduously to implement enhanced border protection strategies to curtail the events of an ever-evolving threat, smuggling of guns, drugs, and ammunition to our borders. For security reasons, the ministry is unable to divulge all of the measures implemented to secure the nation's borders. However, the following are some key measures in place. The Defense Force collaborates with key national stakeholders to embark on both routine and incident-specific intelligence-driven operations to enhance border protection. These operations are conducted through the use of contemporary risk-based techniques in conjunction with up-to-date surveillance equipment to include image detection systems from static and mobile platforms. Additionally, the joint border security elements of the TTDF conduct frequent three-dimensional patrols to detect, deter, and prevent incursions and to provide early warning and indicators of potential threats to our borders. 2, the Defense Force, through the Coast Guard and the Air Guard, conducts numerous maritime and aerial operations aimed at strengthening border patrol and protection using a risk-based approach to secure our borders, focusing their enhanced capabilities against the highest levels of threat and rapidly responding along the vulnerable southwestern and northwestern borders. And I referred to 2 of them a short while ago. The Immigration Division continues to promote national security by monitoring and controlling the movements of persons into, within, and out of the country by utilizing certain systems, including an integrated border management system. These strategies, amongst others, have allowed the Ministry of National Security to achieve greater situational awareness, which has led to a quicker and more appropriate response to evolving threats. Further, the Coast Guard recently intercepted 15 vessels attempting to transport Venezuelan nationals into Trinidad as they made their way to the coast of Matlot on the 14th of November 2018. This is one example of intelligence-led operations. This operation led to the arrest of 6 Venezuelans who were then handed over to the TTPS and immigration. And with respect to the suggestion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that animals are being used to smuggle arms, guns, drugs, and ammunition from Venezuela, there is no evidence of animals being used to smuggle. What we have had are incidents of animals being brought into our borders illegally from Venezuela, but not being used to smuggle arms and ammunition.
Supplemental, Member for Tabakit.
Minister, these animals that are coming into the country, particularly in the Cedros area and South areas, are you seizing these animals and quarantining them, given that they might be carrying diseases of one kind or the other?
Minister of National Security.
That actually falls under the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the answer is yes. Once illegal animals are found being smuggled in, I think they're actually destroyed and not being quarantined, because we can't take the risk that it then populates our population with disease, etc.
Supplemental, Tabakit.
Minister, can you say with certainty that the animals, in fact, have been caught and slaughtered or quarantined? Can you say that with certainty that the Ministry of Agriculture has, in fact, done that?
Minister of National Security.
Yes.
Request.
You okay? Yes. Nice. Proceed, Clerk.
Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, the Companies Amendment Bill 2018 in the name of the Attorney General, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Minister of Planning and Development.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act 2014 and to consequentially amend the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 3505, be now read a second time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will crave your indulgence and ask for Standing Order 4410 to be invoked.
Proceed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Planning and Facilitation Bill, or the Act, was originally designed to reform the town and country planning laws of Trinidad and Tobago by establishing, 1, a system for the preparation and approval of national and subnational development plans, and 2, a system of planning and development approvals which are designed to secure predictability, simplicity, promptness, and transparency in the treatment of development applications. To that extent, that was achieved, we would have ensured that the systems, processes, and tools necessary to ensure a properly spatially planned and modernized Trinidad and Tobago were in place. It is noteworthy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that when the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act was originally presented to this House by the now Member of Parliament for Caroni Central, we were in opposition at the time, and we expressed some very grave concerns over several portions of that act. We articulated those concerns, and in the main, our concerns fell on deaf ears, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the bill was passed in both houses. Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the main things that we had concern about was the fact that we felt that the qualification requirements for the director of the National Planning Agency or the National Planning Authority were very nebulous. We were also concerned, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about the inconsistency in the definition of simple development, which led to an inconsistency in the definition of complex development. We also expressed concern about the ambiguity with respect to the role and involvement of the Tobago House of Assembly and the absence of a chief executive officer to manage the day-to-day operations with regard to the National Planning Authority. And one of the other major concerns that we expressed was the absence of a requirement that an urban planner be one of the persons required to sit on the Environmental Commission. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these concerns were genuine, these concerns were heartfelt, but still they were not taken on board by the last administration. Mr. Deputy Speaker, under this current administration, we established a committee to review the Act. And this committee was convened and chaired by Dr. James Armstrong to ascertain whether the Act could be fully proclaimed in its existing form. The committee held its inaugural meeting on July 18, 2016, and submitted its recommendations in September 2016. The Ministry of Planning and Development continued to review the legislation with a focus on ensuring that the legislation could be operationalized. The review resulted in the amendments that are being presented here today, which are the amendments that we find in the bill before this House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the partial proclamation was of the following sections of the Act, and those were sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 6, 13, 31.1, 31.3, 31.4a, 31.4b, 33.1, 107, and the first schedule with the exception of clause 14. And those were the sections that were proclaimed. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to place on record the concern that we had at that time with regard to the sections that were proclaimed. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to also indicate that the proclamation took place on July 29, 2015. And one of the main concerns that we had at the time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that because of the way that the qualifications for the director of the NPA were described, it appeared to those of us who sat in opposition at the time that the qualifications seemed to be for one particular person, and so we were concerned that the bill as it was then was being skewed to ensure that one person got the position of director of the National Planning Authority. And our concerns seemed to have been justified because the proclamation also dealt with just the development of the National Planning Authority in terms of the person who would be the director and the other positions in that regard. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we heard the date of July 29th and the proclamation of those specific clauses, it also raised our concerns because it was clearly felt that it was being done in time to ensure that prior to the elections, this particular person would have been appointed. And so we felt that our concerns were justified. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this partial proclamation allowed mainly for the establishment, as I said, and appointment of the members of the National Planning Authority and the hiring of staff accordingly. Mr. Deputy Speaker, to execute this mandate, PricewaterhouseCoopers was formally retained by the Ministry of Planning and Development in July 2015. And their mandate was to design the organizational structure of the NPA, specifying job descriptions, job positions, grading, within the overall context for the administration of the system to be established under the Act. They were also mandated to conduct an executive search and assist in the recruitment and selection of persons to fill the following key executive positions: Chief Executive Officer, Chief Enforcement Officer, Chief Building Officer, Corporate Secretary, and Director of Planning. Further mandate was to provide strategic recommendations on the salary structure of the NPA. Prior to the elections, 2 deliverables were completed and paid for before the consultancy was interrupted by the change in administration in September 2015. The 2 deliverables were 1, the inception report, and 2, the preparation of a draft value chain for the NPA with a proposed comparator organizations for compensation survey, the draft job descriptions for inclusion in recruitment advertisements, the preparation of preliminary advertisements inviting applications for NPA executive staff. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the consultancy subsequently lapsed when a review of the Act and the Town and Country Planning Act, as I said before, were requested in 2016. Due to the length of time that the consultancy had been paused, the cost and work schedule has now been adjusted. In fact, in August 2018, we resumed the work of Pricewaterhouse, and the original cost of the consultancy, which was at $351,258, has been adjusted. And this adjustment in cost is due to the need for Pricewaterhouse to update its research data, since the existing data collected stems from a 2015 date and is now outdated. And the consultancy is to be completed in 2 months, and that is to say, it is anticipated to be completed in early December 2018. The new cost is $339,061.88. In October 2018, a Planning and Facilitation of Development Act Implementation Committee was developed in the Ministry of Planning and Development to support full implementation of the Act. To this end, a cabinet note for this committee has been prepared for formal submission to the cabinet. The Implementation Committee will devise a plan of action to support the full proclamation of the Act and the establishment of the National Planning Authority. Mr. Deputy Speaker, additionally, a skills gap analysis has been completed for the implementation of the local government reform, and meetings are ongoing between both ministries. Mr. Deputy Speaker, because of the way that this Act has been crafted, it includes the municipal development authorities and the National Planning Authority. As you well know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, during the period 2007 to 2010, the then government had developed local area plans for the 14 municipal corporations. In addition, the THA has its own development plan. And as a consequence of that, this particular piece of legislation will ensure that the national plan and the area plans work in sync so that the development or the further development of the local government reform takes place with a national plan and a local area development plan. Mr. Deputy Speaker, a work breakdown structure was also completed to provide a global view of the components necessary for the successful implementation of the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the bill before us is very specific. It is a precursor to the full implementation of the Act. It is necessary for amendments to be made to correct identified omissions, to clarify and streamline positions and institutional arrangements and alignments, and it therefore seeks to ensure the alignment with local government reform and the suite of amendments that must be addressed to empower the local authorities to meet the needs of the citizens of this country. It also seeks to provide definitions such as simple development that hitherto were not included and without which operationalization of the Act could be impeded. It also seeks to clarify key institutional structures and key positions which are fundamental to the full proclamation of the Act. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I will take you through the amendments. Clause 1 is a short title, and this would provide for the short title as it says, which is the Planning and Facilitation of Development Amendment Act 2018. Clause 2 is the interpretation of the Act, which would provide for the Act to mean the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act 2014. Clause 3. This is the insertion of the definition of simple development. This clause amends Section 3 of the Act by inserting a new definition of simple development after the definition of road. And that simple development definition, which was not previously defined by the Act, means that now the Act will clearly state what a simple development means, and that is the matters defined as simple development would be consistent with those matters that would mainly comprise simple development applications. Complex development, therefore, would be implied to be those developments not falling within the definition of simple development. Applications relating to simple development will all be determined at the level of the planning authorities. And the proposed definition is as follows. Simple development means development for which an application is made for A, billboards or advertising signs, B, outline or final planning permission not requiring a certificate of environmental clearance, C, change of use, residential or building developments, or any additions thereto, where the cumulative floor area with additions, if any, does not exceed a gross floor area of 500 meters squared. D, land subdivisions, including engineering operations, comprising less than 20 plots, provided that each plot falls within the range of 465 meters squared and 800 meters squared inclusive. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this definition seeks to ensure that simple developments, which would be the developments that would take place under the municipal corporations, is clearly spelled out, and there is no ambiguity as it relates to what is a simple development. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Clause 4. This clause seeks to amend Section 11 of the Act by the removal and replacement of certain representatives on the Development Control Committee. The Development Control Committee will consider complex applications, those applications with national significance, as is referred to it by the Director of Planning and the Chief Building Officer. Upon review of the Act, it was recommended that a representative from the municipal or regional corporations and a representative from the line ministry with responsibility for physical planning be included in the Development Control Committee. The municipal corporations would have jurisdiction, as I said before, over simple applications, but will have to pass complex matters in their jurisdiction to the National Planning Authority. They, we felt, should therefore be part of the deliberations of such matters by the committee, and the representative, in addition, should be technically sound. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Clause 4, therefore, would be amended as follows. Section 11(2)(b) of the Act would be amended to include representatives from the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have said that local government reform is important, an important part of the policy of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We have also said that it is imperative that if there is development to take place in any municipality, the local government representatives must form part and parcel of any development that must take place in their area in their jurisdiction. And as a consequence of that, we felt that it was necessary for a representative of TALGA, which is the Association of Local Government Authorities, to be part of this body that will be looking at development. Please note, Mr. Deputy Speaker, even if it is not a simple development but a complex development, once the development was taking place within the electoral district or within the municipal corporation or the regional corporation or the city, it was imperative, we felt, given the importance of local government reform and given the importance of the local representatives, that the local government authority should sit on the committee that looked at the development. In addition to that, we also are of the view that the ministry with responsibility for physical planning and development of land and be a part of the committee. Also, representatives from the Occupational Safety and Health Agency and the Chief Medical Officer in the ministry with responsibility for health. Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I point out that at this present moment, in the absence of this grouping within the Ministry of Planning and Development, now there is a committee that looks at these complex developments to ensure that they're in keeping with government policy, to ensure that they're in keeping with the national policy for what we want to take place in Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And that committee that sits now includes representatives from the Town and Country Planning Division, representatives from the EMA, sometimes from the IMA, depending on if it's a coastal development, representatives from the Ministry of Works and Transport, from the Transport Division in particular, and from the Drainage Division. We also sometimes include a representative from the Ministry of Health, because it is for most developments, if not all, we do need approval from the Chief Medical Officer or representative. So this will mirror what takes place now, which is new to the Ministry of Planning and Development. Clause 5 amends Section 13 of the Act, and this is the one where we had some very major concerns. Section 13 of the Act deals with the qualifications of the Director of Planning and post-qualification experience of the Director of Planning and the qualifications of the Chief Building Officer and the Chief Enforcement Officer. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Clause 5 of the bill would amend Section 13(2) of the Act by providing additional qualifications for a person employed as the Director of Planning. It would also specify the type of engineering post-qualification experience required for the Chief Building Officer and revise the post-qualification experience required for the Director of Planning, the Chief Building Officer, and the Chief Enforcement Officer. It is the view of the government that the qualifications of the Director of Planning needs to be raised to be consistent with the requirements of eligibility to register as an urban and regional planner under the proposed Urban and Regional Planning Bill. Failing this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Director of Planning cannot be considered as a listed professional in accordance with Part 7 of the existing Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was therefore incongruous that somebody who would be the Director of Planning could not qualify, given the qualifications that were required by the Act, could not qualify to be one of the listed professionals in the very Act that they would be overseeing. And this was one of the major points that we raised when we were in opposition. It would have been incongruous, it would have been totally unfair, and that particular person could not have even been listed as a professional in the profession that the person was supposed to be directing all the planning for Trinidad and Tobago. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, come hell or high water, we could not convince the then minister or the other members that it was incongruous and made absolutely no sense. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I will repeat what the current requirement is for the Director of Planning, which is in the Act, and that is, and I quote, qualifications, and qualifications was not even qualified, just qualifications, and at least 10 years post-qualification experience in urban and regional planning. End of quote. Very vague, very broad. Qualifications in what? Just qualifications. And certainly it did not point to the significant competence required of a person who was to be in the role of Director of Planning, who would be responsible for development planning and development control for Trinidad and Tobago. As a consequence of this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we proposed that the qualifications of the Director of Planning should be as follows. And this is the same proposal we made then, and we're saying that this is the amendment that we have brought to the House. And that is that the Director of Planning shall have an undergraduate degree in the field of planning and a postgraduate degree, a postgraduate qualification in planning or a related field, both of which are to have accredited status and have been granted by an institution accredited under the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago Act, and at least 7 years post-qualification experience in urban and regional planning. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I make the point that this was the concern that we had, and this this was the amendment, this is the amendment that we have brought in the bill. However, on further examination, we are proposing a further amendment. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will ensure that this further amendment is distributed. And the further amendment is, again, in relation to the qualifications of the Director of Planning. And what we have found after we placed this bill before the House is that members of that field, that is the field of urban planning, have indicated that there could be some further concerns. And as a consequence of that, I'm proposing a further amendment, and that is the original amendment may exclude candidates who may not have a degree in planning, but who possess some other approximate undergraduate degree and a postgraduate qualification in planning. What our information, the information that has come to us is that many of the urban and regional planners have obtained master's degrees in urban and regional planning from the University of the West Indies and from other universities for which the matriculation requirement was an undergraduate degree in an appropriate social, environmental, or design science. And it is felt that these persons should not be eliminated from consideration as Director of Planning. And examples of design science include engineering, architectural, an architectural degree, or surveying. The final amendment that we are proposing, therefore, would the final amendment would therefore read, the Director of Planning who shall have 1, an undergraduate degree in the field of urban and regional planning and a postgraduate degree, a postgraduate qualification, in urban and regional planning or a related field, or 2, an undergraduate degree in social, environmental, or design science, and a postgraduate degree in urban and regional planning. So therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that nebulous qualifications is totally eliminated because, in fact, it meant absolutely nothing. And the urban and regional planners were up in arms against that definition. And
why then have an undergraduate degree if both postgraduate degrees are what you're asking for?
The undergraduate degree, we felt, would not be enough. Yes, you need to have. You see, that would bring us back to qualifications. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the post-qualification the post-qualification experience of the 3 positions, therefore, Director of Planning, the Chief Building Officer, and the Chief Enforcement Officer, is revised from 10 years to 7 years to make it easier to fill the posts. Clause 6 of the bill would repeal and replace subsections 2 and 3 of section 15, and that is the functions of the building officer and the chief enforcement officer. So the chief building officer shall, this is the substituting the following sections. 2, the chief building officer shall A, establish inspection procedures for building and engineering operations. B, forward breaches of planning regulations referred to him from the National Planning Authority or a planning authority to the Chief Enforcement Officer. And C, perform the functions under Section 62, 66, 67, 68, and 70 of the Act. Regarding the Chief Enforcement Officer, the Chief Enforcement Officer shall take action against A, breaches of building regulations referred to him by the Chief Building Officer, and B, breaches of planning control referred to him by the Director of Planning. The amendment suggested in clause 7 are as follows, and these amendments would repeal subsection 4 of section 31 of the Act, and that deals with development order. Clause 7 indicates that this provision is no longer necessary because it is already provided under subsection 3, that development allowed by a development order may be subject to such conditions and limitations as may be specified in the development order. So what we found is that there was superfluity, and consequently this can be removed. Additionally, in clause 8, which is an amendment to section 60, this clause would amend the Act by providing a person with the right to appeal to the Environmental Commission against a tree preservation order. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Act as it exists now does not have the right of appeal. The Act allows specifically for the preservation and protection of trees, but it did not allow for a right of appeal once you got an order to protect a tree and that you couldn't cut the tree. So clause 8 would amend section 60 to allow for a right of appeal. Clause 9, again, return to the issue of the simple development application, and because clause 3 of the bill, where we have inserted the definition, there will be no need for this particular section. And there will be an additional amendment to this clause to amend paragraph D in the definition of professional governing body. In that definition, the governing body under the proposed Urban and Regional Planning Profession Act was not mentioned, and that was clearly an oversight. So we are amending it further to mention the Trinidad and Tobago Council for Urban and Regional Planning. Clause 10 amends section 89, and that refers to appeals to the Environmental Commission. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the power to exercise jurisdiction over appeals of decisions made by the Planning Authority, the Environmental Commission is the authority that would now deal with any issues of appeals. And the reference to planning authorities was inadvertently left out in the section of the original Act. And it is clear that planning authorities make all decisions except those related to complex matters. And it is also clear that appeals would therefore arise from those decisions. So in tidying up the Act, we needed to ensure that planning authorities, which would be the municipal authorities or the regional authorities, that appeals could stem from those authorities to the Environmental Commission. That was not part of the Act that was brought. Clause 11, again, is an issue of tidying up, and this is an amendment to section 90. It deals with appeals against development repair orders, compliance notices, immediate compliance orders, and tree preservation orders. And as I said, it is a tidying up clause. And what it seeks to do is insert after the words planning control the words or have been complied with, and in B, in subsection 4, by deleting the words altered or revoked and substituting the words varied or set aside. And this more clearly reflects the relationship between appeals and the Environmental Commission and how they should be effectively stated. With regard to Clause 12, this is a repeal of subsection 1G and H of Section 95, and it deals with offenses. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these provisions we found, after careful examination of the Act, we found that these provisions were not necessary because failure to comply with the requirements of any compliance notice, any compliance order, or a development repair order is already extensively addressed under Sections 54 and 57 of the Act. So we were of the firm view that these sections were again superfluous. With regard to Clause 13 of the bill before us, and this is the amendment of the first schedule, these amendments provide inter alia for the appointment of a Chief Executive Officer of the National Planning Authority, the secondment of officers to the service of the National Planning Authority, and extends the period of the exercise of options available to public officers upon the full proclamation of the Act from 3 months to 6 months. Mr. Deputy Speaker, from several examples where we have had to deal with secondment of public officers to newly formed authorities, we have found that the 3-month period is never enough time for these officers to make their decision and move over to the statutory authority. So this amendment would ensure that enough time or more time than 3 months is given. And the amendment is very specific. In Clause 1, it says we are deleting the word sectoral interest and substituting the word sectoral private interest. Sorry, we are inserting after subclause 3 the following subclause. 3A, the National Planning Authority shall appoint a Chief Executive Officer who shall A, be an ex officio member of the authority and be responsible for the day-to-day management of the National Planning Authority. Further, in Clause 14.2, we are deleting the words 3 months and substituting the words 6 months. And as I said, this provides a more practical time frame for the exercise of the options available to public officers. We are also, by deleting paragraph B and substituting the following paragraph, and I quote, B, be employed with the National Planning Authority on terms and conditions no less favorable than those enjoyed by him in the public service, or the Public Service Commission has, or, and the amendment ends there because it continues as it is in the Act. Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, having spoken to the Public Service Commission, not the Public Service, the PSA, we felt it was important to ensure that the authority did not negatively affect persons who wanted to move over to the service from the public service into the authority. And the Public Service Commission has indicated to the Ministry of Planning and Development that it has no power to transfer persons out of the service and into an independent organization, as we well know. And the Public Service Commission can merely note the movement from the service into the independent organization. And therefore, it was clear that the Act, which said with the approval of the Public Service Commission, was incorrect, and consequently we have removed that because it was not possible for the Commission to give approval or disapproval, so it was incorrect. With regard to paragraph C, the bill amends by stating that the date of assent of this act and substituting the date of commencement of this act. And as I said initially, the act requires proclamation. There was the proclamation of these sections, as I said previously, and there would have to be proclamation of the further sections once the Parliament approves. We also are inserting after clause 14 the following clause, which provides for transfer on secondment to the National Planning Authority. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I quote, 14A1, an officer or employee in the public service, a statutory authority, any domestic or foreign public or private body may, with consent of the National Planning Authority and the approval of the appropriate service commission or the relevant body, consent to be transferred on secondment to the service of the National Planning Authority. Where a transfer...
Member, you have 2 more minutes to complete.
Where a transfer on secondment is effected, such arrangements as may be necessary may be made to preserve the rights of the officer. And clause 14, there is a consequential amendment to the Environmental Management Act, and that is to provide for the members of the Environmental Commission to be expanded to include persons who have knowledge and experience in urban and regional planning. That does not exist at present, and that is important if they have to deal with planning issues. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these, therefore, are the amendments that this government is proposing to the Act. We are firm in the knowledge that this Act, working in conjunction with local government reform, will make major changes to how the development takes place in Trinidad and Tobago. The concerns that we had when we were in opposition, we have made an effort to make the amendments that deal with those concerns. We have started the automation of the Town and Country Planning Division so that development control and development planning can take place more effectively. I have got several complaints from the member for Tabakeet and from other members, even members on my own side, regarding how effectively the Town and Country Planning Division operates. But we understand their concerns, and we know that with the automation and these amendments that we will be effectively able to do proper planning in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are other things that I will indicate, but I await my colleagues, and with those words, I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act 2014 and to consequentially amend the Environmental Management Act Chapter 3505 be now read a second time. I recognize the member for Caroni East. Caroni Central, sir.
Caroni Central, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I take this opportunity to respond to the member for Aruka Maloney and Minister of Planning and Development, and to raise a few issues in relation to the Planning and Facilitation of Development Amendment Bill 2018 before the House. I started to take some notes when the minister was speaking, and then I stopped. And the reason I stopped is because I could not believe the presentation. And the more the minister proceeded, the more confusing the presentation became, in my view. And with all due respect to the members, citizens who might be listening and watching, I am sure that the citizens are none the wiser in understanding anything that the minister said having to do with what were the changes that were being made, what were their implications, why these things were necessary, and what is the significant difference that it will make to the quality of service to the citizen. Remember, town and country planning and planning, the Ministry of Planning and the matters related to approvals for buildings and land development and so on have to do with the citizens of this country. They have to do with people building a home. They have to do with people facilitating a development, making an entrepreneurial investment in a development. And it also has to do with order and system to make sure that that is efficient and transparent. And I don't think the citizen is better off in understanding anything that the minister said here as making a difference to their lives. But I will address some of the issues by going directly to the bill. On page 2 of the amendment bill, simple development is moved from page 277 of the act that was passed in 2014, Part 4, Section 73, and it is then inserted in Section 3 under the definitions. The text and substance are exactly the same. So what the minister has done and what she has come here in the amendment to do is simply to take a part of the bill that already exists and put it in the definition section. And she has not changed a single word in anything that she has transferred to the definition section. And I have to ask myself, well, why was this necessary? So the issue here is this better suited in what is called the definition section, is really actually called interpretation and purpose section, or in the original place which it was located, where the definition of simple development is followed by a definition of complex development. And when you look at page 277 in the Act, what you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in fact that you have simple development and you then have complex development, so that anyone reading the Act will be able to see very clearly what simple development is and what complex development is, and they are located in the same place. What has happened now is that they have pulled simple development in the definition section. And I don't know the rationale. The minister had an explanation, but it does not seem to make good sense to me, or it does not seem to be meaningful enough to justify the movement. Now, in other words, the original Act locates simple and complex development together in sequence. All right? The other issue is there is a deletion of a subclause, E, engineering operations as are described. I don't know why that particular clause has been deleted. I don't know what value it adds when you delete it, and I really don't know what is lost by the deletion. So maybe the minister in her winding up can explain a little bit. But I really cannot understand the reason for the deletion, and I can't understand the reason for the movement. Now, the minister talks about the fact that they have removed the bill. She did not say this, you know. She did not say this. She spoke around the issue. But what they have done is they have taken out OSHA from the complex, from the National Planning Authority roundtable, so to speak, for decision making. And they have taken out the CMO, the Chief Medical Officer. And by her own admission, the minister indicated that in almost every decision you need to have the health official express a point of view or make a contribution or to be present to make an input. I cannot understand why they would take away OSHA, because that really has to do with health and safety matters, having to do with development planning, having to do with land and drainage and related matters, and it also has to do with the buildings themselves. And I don't know why they would take out the health chief medical officer. And what is even more mind-boggling, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that I cannot understand the rationale for the inclusion of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities. Why would you want to do that? The Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities really consists of a cross-political representation of local government authorities in the country. And generally what that does is to discuss issues in relation to local government. And of course they represent Trinidad and Tobago in relation to local government issues and local government conferences abroad. I find it very hard to justify the legitimacy of this organization taking the place especially of an OSHA representative and the chief medical officer. So it seems to me a kind of political input. All right? It seems to me a political intervention here. The second thing is that what is the rationale for the inclusion of the Trinidad? Sorry, I said that. Why include a Ministry of Planning official when the idea behind the establishment of the National Planning Authority is to establish an arm's-length relationship between the Planning Authority and the ministry? Now, this bill was very thoughtfully conceived. And if you read some of the Hansard report, and this bill dates back, and as I have said when I was minister, dates back to 1988, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when the reform process began, and several administrations have looked at this, and there was a conceptual frame for it, and the idea was, as this bill was passed in 2014, that there would be a certain kind of power in the hands of the minister, what you might call residual power, the power of recall. The minister had the ability to intervene, but you gave a lot of the authority to the National Planning Authority. And the other authorities that had jurisdiction to give approval for plans and so on, okay? And the question is, why do you want to insert now a Ministry of Planning official into the National Planning Authority when there is already a relationship established between the Minister of Planning and the Director of Planning? And there is a procedure by which the one engages the other. And as I said, there are residual powers for the Minister of Planning including the right to recall if he or she does not agree with a decision, and then there's a process by which you engage to deal with certain things afterwards. So I find that the deletion of OSHA, the elimination of the CMO, I do not find it to be justifiable, and I do not find the inclusion of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government Authorities and the inclusion of a ministerial functionary from planning as being justifiable either. And I would ask the minister to reconsider understanding the philosophical underpinnings of the bill. On page 3 of the bill before us, these have to do with the structure of the National Planning Authority, which calls for 3 heads: the Director of Planning, the Chief Building Officer, and the Chief Enforcement Officer. In each and every case, the post-qualification experience has been reduced from 10 years to 7 years. It may be argued that 10 years are too many, and it may be argued that 7 years of experience are adequate. I don't have any problem with that. But given the way the minister did the presentation, I feel that they have a candidate in mind for one of these posts, if not 3. And when the information becomes clear in the public domain, I think we will find out that the person or the persons only have 7 years of qualification.
Less than 10.
Lucky 7?
Lower in the bar.
Now,
Wasn't named Lucky?
let us follow this thing carefully, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Why are the qualifications of the Chief Building Officer and Chief Enforcement Officer so clear, so simple, so uncumbersome, so straightforward, and the qualifications of the Director of Planning so meticulously elaborated and drawn out? Let me read it. Okay? Remember, the minister came here with amendments, right? So let us look at the qualifications for the Chief Building Officer. Based on the amendments, this is the minister's amendment before us in this bill now. For the Chief Building Officer, oh, it is not in here. It's in the original bill because she makes no amendments in these matters.
15 BNC or something.
Just 1 second. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Chief Enforcement Officer, this is what it reads now. The Chief Enforcement Officer who shall have qualifications and at least 7 with the amendment years post-qualifications experience in a profession relating to the built environment. That is what the existing law says. And the minister brings no amendment for this except to change 10 years to 7 years. And the minister also, in the other one, be an attorney at law of at least 7 years standing with the amendment and have experience in law relating to the built environment. And the Chief Building Officer, who shall have qualifications and at least 7 years post-qualification experience in, and the one amendment is civil engineering. So they have changed engineering to civil engineering. But the most convoluted amendments are really left for the Director of Planning. And this is the Director of Planning, separate and distinct from the Chief Building Officer and the Chief Enforcement Officer, for which there are no elaborate requirements and only one simple amendment in the case of the change of engineering only to civil engineering. For the Director of Planning, you have now an undergraduate degree in the field of planning and a postgraduate qualification in planning or a related field, both of which are to have accredited status and have been granted by an institution accredited under the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago Act, and then it goes to the 7 years post-qualification experience in urban and regional planning. Now, I am not surprised that she came with a further amendment. The Minister of Planning came with a further amendment today on this very clause. Because when I read it, I said, like, how could you single out this thing like that? Yep. What is the problem that they have? You know, there's a saying that, you know, when you're accustomed to expropriating things everywhere you see it, when you see bag, you get confused. So I am not surprised at what has happened here. And we will look at some of the other amendments, and really there seems to be the establishment here of a kind of capacity for, I don't want to use the words gangsterism, but there seems to be a capacity being built up here that is not nice. Well said. Well put. So my summary position on this thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that in the case certainly of the Director of Planning, this piece of amendment here, together with the further amendments that have been brought today, have been designed ad hominem. They have been designed for two purposes. One, to include, and the other, to exclude.
Related purposes. Deputy Speaker, there is a direct imputation of improper purpose. Correct. Because ad hominem legislation is constitutionally improper, sir. Correct. So I take strong objection to the argument of the Minister.
Members, hold on. Member, again, it's either you be specific if you want to go down that road, or if not, you retract and move on accordingly. You're given the option to be more specific if you care to.
Well, I ask it as a question then. Has this amendment?
6, there is no way to describe something which is improper by way of asking a question, sir.
There's no right way of doing the wrong thing.
Members, please. Members, please. Member for Siparia and member for Laventille West, if you care to continue the dialogue, you all are free to exit the chamber and proceed. Other than that, hold on. Sorry, sir. Member, Kindly retract the statement totally, please.
Minister,
Member, Separia and Naparima, I need no echo. I have ruled. Proceed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, on your instructions, I retract the statement. But I asked the question, might this amendment have been designed either to favor or to exclude? The roles of the Director of Planning, the Chief Building Officer, and the Chief Enforcement Officer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, have been altered. All right, the issue is whether the changes make for more bureaucracy or greater clarity and precision. I see things have to be referred now to the Chief Building Inspector by the Director of Planning, whereas the Chief Building Inspector would have been able to act on the basis of any matter that came before the Chief Building Officer from any authority, or may have been able to act in his own or her own stead. So I don't know if we have created more bureaucracy or greater clarity and precision. I won't fight or argue about that. Most of the other elements are not contentious. We have the provision of a chief executive officer. The member for Aruka Maloney and Minister of Planning said that there was a big issue about that. I don't remember it, I'll be quite frank. It may have come up, but I don't remember it as a big issue. And certainly there could be no real objection to something like that. But the real question, Mr. Deputy Speaker, given these amendments, which the minister took time to go through, and some of which I've addressed here, and it's clear that the only real amendment that the minister was interested here is a reduction of the 10 years to 7 years, and the redefinition of the terms and the framework for the hiring of the Director of Planning. Everything else here is not really, nothing here is more substantive of any real great substance. But having said that, the real question is, did you need 3 years, Minister, to bring these amendments here? You spent 3 years, did not do anything more, did not add any value to the legislation, did not proclaim the legislation, and after 3 years you bring these amendments here, focus by and large on the job and the job specifications and the legislative basis on which the Director of Planning is going to be hired.
3 years ago, you had
3 years for that.
You had 4 years experience 3 years ago.
So my colleague is saying that maybe the person, anyway, I will be asked again to withdraw. So I better not say. Anyway, most of the other amendments are neither here nor there. And I raise some of the issues here now, which I think are worthy of raising. Now, the purpose of the Parent Act, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was, first of all, to reform town and country planning division and process. The minister herself admits that people are not very pleased with what is happening now. I think we had made good progress when I was there. And the complex, within 60 days you could get an approval. For more complex approval, maybe 90 days, 120 days. I don't remember the exact times now. But those things were very much. And the complex committee that she talks about were established in my time. I spoke about them in the In the 2014 Hansard, you will see that I mentioned that they were already established. You know, they were meant to strengthen the building laws in Trinidad and Tobago, this bill. It was meant also to establish a system for the preparation and approval of national and subnational development plans. The minister admitted that. And it was supposed to make things more transparent and predictable for the ordinary citizen, because the bill was done with the citizen in mind, you know. And as I said, it was not just my idea. We had inputs. This bill has been in process since 1988. And in 2000, and from about 2001 to 2010, this bill sat there and lapsed. Yes, 99 to 2010, it lapsed, and nothing was done all of those years. And if you look at the process for the passage of this bill, you'll see how the opposition at the time helped to drag this bill along and to extend the time, which is why we didn't pass this bill maybe in 2013 or 2012. And when the Minister for Planning and Development talks about the fact that we brought something in July 2015, it was because the bill had been passed in 2014. And you had to do the preparatory things, and if you are going to set up a planning authority, what do you do first? Don't you get to the point where you can, in fact, establish the institution so you can get the job going? We did what was required. So I want to ask the minister, you know, you have not really done anything under this really valuable bill if you had brought it to fruition. What is happening, for instance, to, you know, these permissions have a lot to do with construction, all right? And if you look at cement sales, for instance, which is a good indicator of what's happening in construction, you will see that between January and September of this year, you have less cement being sold than January and September, even last year, 2017, which was not a great year for construction. So all of these issues of town and country, the issues related to the planning and facilitation bill, not just the passage of the amendments or the making of the amendments, but the proclamation of the bill, really have to do with development issues. They have to do with the citizen getting permission, building a house. Yes?
Has expired. You have an additional 15. You care to avail?
I shall be grateful.
Proceed.
And I say these things understanding, of course, that they have implications for other things, because we have a falling labor force in this country. We have a rising economically inactive population. That is problems of the labor force participation rate. We have declining gross capital formation, all right, which is to say the GDP is moving down. We have an expenditure bias towards imports. And the murders in this country alone have reduced the labor force by 1%. In that kind of situation, the planning and facilitation bill.
Yes. Continue to take them on.
What it says what it says to us is that this business of development, construction, home construction, etc., are very important. Also, you have, and the minister is Minister of Planning, you also have a problem with agriculture.
Difficulty in hearing our policies. Whoever.
Again, members, according to the standing order, we're supposed to listen in silence. So again, I would also like to hear the members. So please, members on both sides, listen in silence, please. Proceed.
Thank you very much. So, not only in housing, but in agriculture, and the reason I raise that is because agricultural lands and the movement of agricultural lands, passage of approvals, and also movement of agricultural lands to housing, etc. That is also related to her. But there is a real reduction in the production process in agriculture as well. And I might ask, is the state building any houses? Are there any public or private partnerships in housing? Are there any state-constructed houses going up? Is any housing construction going up that will make a difference to the 140,000 applicants, I think the Minister of Finance told us in the budget, were waiting for houses? And the Minister of Planning should keep her eyes on some of these things. Now, I want to deal with this question of qualifications. You see, the undergraduate degree in urban planning that the amendment calls for is not available at UWI.
What? Whoa. So we're making law for what?
And there are very few urban planners in the world who did an undergraduate degree in urban planning. Most people will do their degree in sociology, geography, the environment, engineering, whatever. And they go for a post, it's like an MBA, you go for a postgraduate qualification in the field. It is no wonder that they hustle to make this amendment, because somebody must whisper it in their ears.
So, Deputy Speaker, I again rise on 48-6.
Member, before I rule, I heard your statement. I heard your statement. Kindly retract it, please, member.
Yes, I do, sir.
Stand and do it in the appropriate fashion.
Stand and retract.
Thank you.
Looking like Wiley number 2.
Honorable Adri, 48-6. Expound, please.
Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the honourable member stood and came with the same conclusion that he did a while ago, which he retreated from, which is that something is being created in an ad hominem fashion.
Members, please.
It is the way that it came across from the honourable members. Return to the issue, sir. So I rise for consistency.
Somebody whisper it in his ear.
Again, honourable member, just be careful in the road that you're going down, again, because it was highlighted earlier.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if you can.
Hold on. Members, I continue to rule, and members continue to make statements after I rule. Please. Naparima. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. Member, proceed.
Yes. So given this situation with undergraduate degrees and postgraduate degrees in urban and regional planning, I mean, shouldn't we be doing something in terms of manpower planning, in the role of scholarships, etc.? Yeah. Alignment of human capital with economic, environmental, and developmental issues, and the diversification agenda. Shouldn't we be doing that rather than trying to come and prepare the text of an amendment in order to deal with a reality you wish to create?
Whoa,
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are some other outstanding issues that I would like to raise. What about building and land subdivision codes? Are all of these things settled now? I'm asking question. What about the physical, financial, and human resources to put this bill into effect? does the proposal of the new THA legislation, I'm not sure if it has left the JSC yet, I know it went to the JSC, will that have any effect on this particular bill here, the planning and facilitation bill? Because we don't know finally what is going to be in the bill. Since 2015, Mr. Deputy Chairman, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and given that the minister herself said that local government was very important in their position as a government, that these things were very important, and given that we had consultations in 2016 on devolution and decentralization and transfer of power to local government, what progress has been on this simple devolution that is called for here in this particular bill, and which was started? The process had started, the process of consultation between local government and planning had started since 2014 while the bill was being discussed in Parliament. Has there been any revision or reflection or update of any of the policies in relation to this bill and how it might be effective? Has the PSA and other unions been engaged properly? I know that there are clauses here which I have no problem with that have to do with the movement of people from the public service into these new institutions that are going to be created. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is only one consequential amendment to the EMA Act, but what about the Municipal Corporations Act? Are we going to have consequential amendments there? And the implications for local government reform, won't we have a legislative requirement in order to effect that? Is there any need for adjustment of the Public Health Act, for instance? You know? And what is the role of enforcement in this? You know, enforcement is now empowered in this legislation, and there's a reason for that. You have to deal with the realities of Trinidad and Tobago, of people doing things that they are not supposed to do, breaking the law. But what is the role of enforcement for an unauthorized state development, for instance? How is this going to be attended to? And what are the implications for a policy if you have a quasi-independent institution, which is why I raised the issue of planning being represented on the committee when the minister already has residual powers and jurisdiction? What is the use, what is the value of the independence, the quasi-independence that this institution has? And what is the significance of that for the amendments that we are making in the legislation? The minister mentioned automation. What is happening in automation? Is the ministry, via the town and country planning, automating old processes that exist now? Or are they automating new processes as envisaged under this plan which needs to be proclaimed? Now, this is a very important question, because if you do the wrong thing, you're going to have to do it all over again if you are to effect it under the bill. So I am not saying that they are doing the wrong thing, and they are probably doing the right thing, but I would like clarification on it. The ICT system in ministries is a problem. That is according to the Auditor General's report. And it says here, in one chapter, the top of page 73, the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, in collaboration with the Ministry of Planning and Development, should address the IT needs of ministries and departments in a holistic manner to achieve effective systems interoperability. So they are basically saying you have a dysfunctional ICT system. Planning should have a key role in it. public administration should have a key role of it. So when I'm asking this question about automation and whether it is proceeding as it should and addressing the realities of the new bill, it is a serious question, okay? Because in the ICT, we have not solved the IRIS problem, the integrated financial management system, public administration issues, customer service issues remain, interministerial collaboration remain an issue. And part of this, for instance, one of the reasons we have gone so low from 79, I believe, to 105 in ease of doing business is because of the relationship between Ministry of Industry and Ministry of Planning, that these two ministries must do something together in order to advance the case for a more competitive country.
Bureaucracy.
So we also have the implementation delay I mentioned. Why 3 years? I asked the question. I asked the question about the small building code. There are built heritage regulations and other things that we need to know about in relation to this. And I want to say that when I left the ministry, a cabinet note under the Kamala Prasad Bisesa government and administration was approved for the transition process. So that was there, how to make the transition. A detailed implementation strategy, we withheld that from going to cabinet, but it was there in the ministry, it was done. We felt perhaps we had not been enough prepared to do that detailed implementation strategy, but it was there in the ministry. I don't know if that is the detailed strategy that the minister mentioned too. A note of detailed action required was left on local government and its requirements as well. A municipal planning committee was also established so that, and we had engaged and begun 5 pilots.
Honorable Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Yes, thank you, sir. We had done 5 pilots, 1 in Tobago, Port of Spain, Chaguanas, Tunapuna, and San Fernando, because we felt that you did not have to do all the local government areas at once, that if you did these pilots for 5 and you used the planning offices that were in different places, whether they were in San Fernando and we were doing something with Chaguanas, etc., that would be enough to start the process, and over time we would be able to deal with everything else. Everything we did was based on a realistic assessment of what was on the ground and what needed to be done. So I just probably have a minute, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I simply want to say that we welcome the minister coming to speak to this bill. We are most concerned about the proclamation. We're concerned about the thinking behind some of these amendments here, and the fact that new amendments had to be brought after the old amendments were circulated tells us that things were not properly thought through, and perhaps they need to reconsider. And having said that, I want to say that we await the minister's response to hear some of the responses to what I have said here. Thank you very much.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 53, I beg to move that the debate on the Planning and Facilitation of Development Amendment Bill be adjourned.
Honorable members, the question is that the debate on the Planning and Facilitation of Development Amendment Bill 2018 be adjourned. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we will move on now to the committee stage of the Income Tax Act.
Honorable members, the committee stage of the following bill, which was adjourned on Friday, November 2nd, 2018, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act. The House will now go into the Committee of the Whole. Honorable members, we would like now to reconvene the Committee of the Whole. Welcome to the technocrats from the Ministry of Finance, AG's office. One second. Honorable members, the committee stage of the following bill, which was adjourned on Friday, November 2nd, will be resumed. Honorable members, on Friday, 2nd November 2018, clauses 1 to 4 of the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 were considered in the Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. We now resume the Committee of the Whole, and I ask the Minister of Finance to make a statement as identified.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What I would ask the House to do is, since the clause that we stopped at is the clause that is attracting the attention of both sides of the House, and the clause that is substantive to the discussion between both sides. There are other clauses in this bill, namely 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, several of which provide protection for citizens, and I'd like to go straight to 6 and deal with 6 down to the last one, 10, and then we can go back to 5, which is the one that is attracting attention.
Okay, can I get the agreement of the House based on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance? The ayes have it? Okay, proceed.
Clause 6.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 6 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6 now stands part of the bill.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, my apologies. On the last, is this circulated today or just circulated on the last occasion? All right. Deputy Speaker, I'm being told...
One second. There's a mobile phone. Right, this is about the third time when we were in the house. You know, we are getting some vibration. So please make sure it is on silent or switched off, please. It now went off again.
Deputy Speaker, can I just confirm whether this list of amendments that were to be moved by me was circulated to members on the last occasion? Walked with it today.
Right.
What shall we do?
Members of the House, the circulation with regards to clause, all the clauses or just clause 6 alone?
It's just 6 and 8.
6 and 8. Chief Whip, your bench has...
Yeah, sure.
If we could, Mr. Chair, if I could just...
One second. Clerk, provide the copies, please.
Just to remind, we traversed it in the debate. It was the recommendations from the Global Forum, which were the very innocuous ones, just adding in individual or. So clauses 6 and 8 were direct recommendations coming from the Global Forum itself, as communicated to all of us.
These were very minor amendments.
We have it in front of us before the AG attempts to give us a...
Fair enough. So it's been circulated this time and...
Yeah, so
right.
we don't have it
AG,
today.
1 sec. Yeah. All right, so it's been passed on.
Have it, sir.
You had
Thank
enough
you.
there, right? You have enough for them, right? Okay.
Well, some get it, some don't have
So,
it.
Member for
You have
Siparia?
enough. Yeah, we know.
Member for Siparia?
You confirmed it was circulated. Okay. So, Mr. Deputy Chairman, the amendment that has been circulated to clause 6 is really making some very minor stylistic amendments to clause 6. In the proposed section 4B, what is this, typographical? So in clause 4B is just to correct some typographical, it's typographical. In 4C, again typographical, and indeed this is the one where the Global Forum had asked us to include after the word individual, the words entity or legal arrangement. They were trying to capture everything, whether it was a person, a legal person, an individual person, or a partnership, a joint venture, that sort of thing. So the Global Forum just asked us to add after the word individual in 4C, the words entity or legal arrangement. So it's not a big deal. Okay, Mr. Chairman? That's it.
Okay, sure. Oh, Rupuchis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chairman. Mr. Deputy Chairman, I just want to respond to the Minister on this specific matter and to be allowed to just make a very brief statement on the proceedings. And a statement made by the Minister a couple seconds ago led me here, in that the Minister is indicating that the Global Forum asked the government to do something, and the government is making the amendment to facilitate that request from the Global Forum. Mr. Deputy Chairman, when we adjourned on the last occasion, myself and other colleagues on this side took a position on this matter, and I just wanted to remind the Minister of Finance, for the record, as we restart the process, that the opposition has been in touch with the government and has responded in writing to our proceedings this afternoon. And we want to reiterate and strongly commend the Minister to adopt the view as outlined by the Leader of the Opposition and members on this side, that this entire process should be recommitted to a joint select committee to look at all the amendments.
6 of the bill. This is not a debate. We're not engaging in a debate.
Mr. Deputy Chairman, this comment I'm making will be relevant to every clause. So I may have to repeat it at every clause. In that, and I prefer not to do that, but to indicate the position generally and from the start. So we are not accused in any way of misleading the government or participating in this process or ambushing them. And the process is very clear. We stated on the last occasion, if you just give me a minute to indicate that there are other complex issues. I
need to hear the member. I need to hear the member.
There are other complex issues that have been raised in the public domain by the Leader of the Opposition in a comprehensive response to the government that took the form of both a press release and a letter sent to the Minister of Finance. That letter and the press release states in detail the concerns of the opposition. And apart from the specifics, we are very concerned that we ought not to come to the floor on such a serious matter and attempt to make law on the hoof. Because we are hearing the minister even now with this clause. I come back to the clause saying that we are making a change, whether it's minor or major, because the Global Forum tell us to do that. Now, we have no evidence on this side. We have no information as to what the Global Forum is telling us.
Mr. Chairman,
because on the first,
if we're having a debate, if we're having a debate,
but I reserve my right. Okay, Honorable Prime Minister, could you round up your point?
I'll round it up. I will round it up by saying at this stage, the opposition has no confidence in the government and the information being provided.
Honorable AG or the Prime Minister?
Let me speak. Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Oropuchis, you said you were round up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Prime Minister.
We are guided in this chamber by the rules and regulations that we accept. If the opposition has no confidence in the government, then you're free to file a vote of no confidence in such as a promise. But we cannot convert the committee stage into a one-sided debate. I don't expect you to have confidence in the government. I know what you have confidence in. Mr. Chairman, I would like the Attorney General to respond to that intervention.
Right. Now, members, hold on. Members, hold on. In the committee stage, members have 5 minutes, not exceeding 5 minutes, to make their point. So I now recognize the Attorney General. And I'm going by the standing orders. For both sides of the House.
Mr. Chairman.
Oropuchis, I have ruled. Oropuchis, I have ruled, not exceeding 5 minutes. AG.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the honourable intervention made by the honourable Prime Minister. I acknowledge receipt of the Leader of the Opposition's letter today at 1:48 p.m. whilst we were sitting in the House. So, having received this letter for the first time, it's dated the 22nd of November 2018. Today is the 23rd. We received it at 1:48 p.m. whilst in the House. Now, I've had the opportunity to peruse the letter. It's not a complicated letter. When you get to the crux of the issue, I can say with absolute certainty that Clause 6, Clause 7, Clause 8, Clause 9, and Clause 10 are certainly not dealt with in the manner spoken about by my learned colleague. I have the Leader of the Opposition's letter here. Specifically, sir, the Leader of the Opposition, having given us her response for the first time in 21 days, when last we were here, certainly, Mr. Chairman, certainly has made no issue at all of the clause that we're on, right down to the end of the bill. The only issues raised by the Leader of the Opposition in her written correspondence before me now relate to the clause which we have stood down, sir. In those circumstances, there is nothing that is difficult left to treat with this. Mr. Chairman, I remind further, we took the step to circulate the comments that came from the Global Forum in the marked up track change version. So the members opposite have no need to rely only upon what the government says. They received the document that came from the Global Forum with their commentary attached to it. So it is entirely untrue to make the representation that my learned colleague has. In those circumstances, sir, there being no reference to anything other than Clause 5, which we've stood down, in the 8 pages that the Leader of the Opposition has put in writing today, and they having received the commentary coming from the Global Forum itself in writing 21 days ago, I therefore beg to move that we proceed with recording the observations that members may wish to make on this clause.
Right, hold 1 second. Oropuchis, What aspect?
I just wanted to respond in 1 minute to
Mr.
what the
Chairman,
Attorney
point of
General
order.
has said.
Mr. Chairman, point of order in
responding
committee.
to me.
Mr.
Is it
Chairman,
on clause 6? Point
of order.
Okay.
What's it? Chairman. 69(1). 69(1). We are not allowed to discuss the general merits and principles of the bill, only the details. So we are only allowed as a committee to discuss the drafting of this clause and any proposed amendments to it, not the general principles and merits of the bill.
Mr. Deputy
69(1) prohibits that.
The Attorney General spoke of a process.
The point that you want to make, is on what?
In relation to the AG on process. He was allowed to speak on process.
Okay, members, hold on.
69(1).
Which is, you would have made your comment, the AG responded.
And he responded.
I am not going to accept no more.
Was inaccurate, sir.
Hold on, I'm not going to accept no other point on it. Naparima, what's the point you want to make?
No, I responded on that side.
Right, fine. So members, at this time, all right, at this time, in terms of the clause 6 that we are dealing with, and based on the information on 69(1), we shall proceed. All right? So, Minister of Finance, any?
If you can't speak, let's vote.
The debate on the prescription is over, but the committee stage can speak to every word in the lines. And what is put here now, sir, is open for commentary. So let's be clear, there is no shutout. It is just keeping the process clear.
Mr. Chair.
Member for Siparia, all right, you care to make a comment based on my ruling, based on 69(1), in terms...
No further comment.
Mr. Chair.
Right, in terms of the details of the particular clause, or if on the amendment.
No further comments.
Mr. Chair, may I?
What aspect, member? Clause 6, what's...
I am not allowed to speak, sir?
No, I'm not saying that. Clause 6, and then based on standing order, based on the standing order, we are not going into the details, right? If it is that we are going by the books. Right. Right. On the amendment. Right. Only on the amendment. Right. So members, no further questions on the amendment. Right. The question is that clause 6 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I am going to rule. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 6 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 10. Clause 10. Didn't you say 6, 10, and then 7? Yes.
The question is that clause 7 stand part of the bill.
We have no amendments to clause 7.
The question is that clause 7 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. Clause 7 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 8.
The question is that clause 8. The question is that clause 8 stand part of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, there is an amendment circulated as there was for clause 6. And that is simply to make a similar change that we made before. After the word individual, you add the words entity or legal arrangement. And that is after we sent the draft income tax amendment bill, income tax amendment bill 2018 to the Global Forum. This was one of the recommendations that they requested from us. And this was already stated in the introduction of this bill, in my introduction and in my winding up, and shared with the opposition on a previous occasion. So this is just exactly what was done with clause 6 with respect to adding the words entity or legal arrangement so that you capture every possible. And this is also FATCA, cut and paste.
This is 93A, 213, not 113.
Thank you.
Right. Chief Whip, the clause 8 as amended, you all have it in your possession?
So sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was a little distracted there. I hadn't finished. This is also taken directly from the FATCA Act, which was passed by this House with the support of the opposition, this wording. And there's a little error in the circulated amendment. It should be 93.2 and 93.3 rather than 93.1 and 93.3. I know I'm talking about the words that are the same. Are we adding entity or legal arrangement after the word individual? There's a typo in the amendment. It should be 93A2 and 3, not 93A1 and 3. So I am asking, Mr. Chairman, that this clause be accepted as amended.
Member for Siparia.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the Minister is saying this is identical to what you find in the FATCA legislation. But you see, this is not like the FATCA legislation. That is why you need the other bill, the one that brings into domestic legislation the Global Forum Agreement. It is within that piece of legislation that these things were put in. You're here now amending the Income Tax Act. And it goes back to our general point, which I will not make again, sir, that the three need to be dealt with together.
Simultaneously.
AG, Attorney General.
Yes, sir, thank you. May I address the proposed amendment? Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Chairman, this exemption from the provisions of the Data Protection Act is a necessary requirement to make this law in keeping with the Tax Information Exchange Act for the United States of America, which we passed. So the consequential amendment here, the first time that we're considering the Income Tax Act, is to simply bring this act in line with what we did in FATCA. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it isn't that this is associated with any other piece of law. And in fact, I should remind something that the Minister of Finance brought to me. There is no bill in this Parliament other than this bill. If you look at the order paper, Mr. Deputy Speaker, something which I find quite curious that my friends have not understood, there is no mutual assistance bill that was saved or introduced into this Parliament in this session, nor is there a Tax Information Exchange Act amendment which is on this order paper. And what that drives home, sir, is that this concept of returning to some JSC is not sensible because it is functus. There is no bill on the order paper. So there are no other bills. So the only piece of law here is the Income Tax Amendment Act. And the reason, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the Global Forum has said to us categorically that the key to entering into all of the other pieces, tax information, etc., flow and spring from the Income Tax Amendment Act. So this amendment which we're discussing right now is one which comes about because of the FATCA legislation, and it therefore stands on its own that way.
Speaker, proceed.
Currently Central, hold on, AG. AG.
Yes. Would the AG admit that 3 bills were sent together?
Mr. Chairman, could we deal with clause 7 of
Central
the bill, please?
As we identify in the standing order 69-1, we cannot go into the details. We must discuss the clause.
Just raise the...
Right. Hold on. 1 second, Minister of Finance. Okay, so let's be specific. Let me hear your point so that I'll be able to determine whether it is the road that you're going up. But go ahead. I give you the opportunity.
Yeah, it's a very precise point, which is that would the AG admit that 3 bills were referred?
Mr. Chairman, there's only one bill before the House, and we are dealing with clause
Minister of
7 of
Finance,
that bill.
hold on. The Attorney General identified some points, and he spoke about the various bills. So I'd just like to hear the member for Caroni Central. It's only fair.
Yes.
Proceed.
Would the AG admit that there were
Members-
3 bills that were referred to the JSC in the first instance, and that this bill alone came back to the House for debate without the work of the JSC having been completed?
Attorney
If
General,
the AG would agree to that, then perhaps you could have a conversation.
Mr. Chairman, I think the honourable member is perhaps forgetting the facts. The work of the Joint Select Committee was completed on the presentation of the report, which we debated on the 2nd of November. There was a minority report included in that. Both were debated. The only piece of legislation in this session of the Parliament is this. So there's no need for admission. It's a matter of fact. The matter of fact is the bill before us is the only bill before us. And it isn't an attempt to cause subterfusion or to misguide people, but my friends have to know their facts, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Chairman, and it's clear that they don't.
Could we press on, please?
which is on what matter, what aspect you want to, on the clause?
Clause, I would just want to ask the Attorney General.
Because, hold on, member, because if we continue, we'll go back and forth to debating on what the other individual just said. So I just want to ensure. So, but I'll give you the opportunity. Let me hear you quickly.
I just want to invite the Attorney General to move his position and don't use formality to defeat principle.
Okay.
Clause 7, please,
I'll
Mr.
move on.
Chairman.
Hold on.
No, we have to vote on this. We already voted on 7.
Okay. Honorable members. Honorable members, to ensure that the records read correctly, the question is that Clause 8 be amended as follows. In proposed section 93A, you said 2 and 3, Mr. Finance?
Instead of 93.1,
right, you have 93.2.
It should be 93.2. The officer has pointed that out to me. The only change is from 93A1 to 93A2, nothing else.
Right, so 93A2, right, for the records?
Yeah.
As amended as follows.
Yeah.
Those in favor? In proposed section 93A2 and 3, insert after the word individual the words entity or legal arrangement. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the ayes have it. The question is that Clause 8 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those in favor say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 9.
We have no amendments to Clause 9.
The question is that Clause 9 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 9 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 9 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 10.
We have no amendments to Clause 10.
The question is that Clause 10 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 10 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 10 now stands part of the bill.
And Mr. Chairman, can we go now to Clause 5, which is the clause that was referred to in the minority report of members opposite as being the clause that required adjustment?
Clause 5.
The question is, that Clause 5 stand part of the bill. Minister of Finance.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to propose that the bill be referred, clause 5 of the bill be referred to a select committee of this House, that committee to report back at the next sitting of the House, which I am told is Friday of next week.
Confirm that date again, sir. Member.
Mr. Chairman, let me just clarify. I'm hearing members opposite speaking about 3 bills. There is only 1 bill before the House, and there's only 1 bill on the order paper. There are, the concept of 3 bills is misguided because there are not 3 bills, there's 1 bill. So I'm proposing that this 1 bill, that is the only bill on the order paper, clause 5 of this single bill, that is the only bill on the order paper dealing with this matter. There are not 3 bills, Mr. Chairman. I want to make this clear. We cannot refer 3 bills to committee that don't exist. Those are 2 bills that are not before this House. Those other bills are not before this House. And therefore, the only bill that we could possibly refer to a committee is this bill. So I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, that we refer clause 5 of this bill to a select committee to report back to the House next Friday, and that is to accommodate the concerns raised by the opposition.
Next Friday's voting. Proceed. Next Friday.
The member has moved a motion. It has to be a motion. You can't send it to a committee without a motion. I'll wait for the Deputy Speaker to rule.
Chairman, let me go back to the House and report we've made progress. Yes. And then the leader of government business will move. Yeah. Not just. Mr. Chairman, I wish to advise it is the intention to refer clause 5 of the bill to a select committee of the House. Therefore, I beg to move that this committee discontinue consideration of the bill. No, there's no debate on that.
Is there a precedent for referring one clause to a select committee?
1 second. Honorable members, the question is, honorable members, the question is that this committee discontinue consideration of the bill. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. I think the ayes have it. This House will now resume.
It's looking like a fed. Yes. Look, we do understand English. We do understand what? You are the Attorney General trying to be careful. Fine. Yeah. Select us 1 week. 24/7. 1 week. You don't want to do that.
Unnecessary conflict. Yes.
House, please come.
What about the people dealing with all this? Income. Look at this bungling here. What about this bungling here? What about this bungling right here? If you had this, if you had so forest space stuff that it will never happen. Lavender West. Lavender.
This House is resumed. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the following members be appointed to a special select committee of the House. Oh, I'm so sorry. Deputy Speaker, I wish to report that clauses 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of the Income Tax Amendment Bill, in addition to clauses that were previously considered, 1 to 4, were considered and approved by the Committee of the Whole. With amendments. In accordance with Standing Order 68.3, I beg to move that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 be withdrawn from the Committee of the Whole and the bill be referred to a special select committee of the House of Representatives hereby established, and that this committee be mandated to consider the bill and report on the bill by Friday, the 30th of November, 2018.
It's still a one-clause committee. Nobody have just passed everything, right? They all have to pass it. You can't come back to committee with that. You can't come back to the committee with that. You cannot come back to the committee with that. Only with the one.
Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much,
Minister of no. One second. Hold bill. Honorable members, I wish to report that clauses. I wish to report Honorable members, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018 be withdrawn from the Committee of the Whole and the bill be referred to a special select committee of the House of Representatives hereby established, and this committee be mandated to consider the report on the bill and report by Friday the 30th November 2018. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against?
No.
I think the ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the following members be appointed to the Special Select Committee of the House of Representatives on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. Mr. Colum Imbert, Mr. Faris Al-Rawi, Mr. Fitzgerald Hines, Mr. Randall Mitchell, and such 2 other members to be named by the members of the opposition. Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Can I indicate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the opposition will not be placing any members on that GST.
Honorable members, the question is that the following members be appointed to the Special Select Committee of the House of Representatives on the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2018. The Honorable Com Imbert, the Honorable Faris Alwari, the Honorable Fitzgerald Hines, the Honorable Randall Mitchell, and 2 members of the opposition team. To be named. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. I think the ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn to Friday, the 30th day of November at 1:30 p.m., at which time we will consider the Income Tax Amendment Bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn. But before the adjournment, we have 2 matters to be dealt with. At this time,
indicate that in discussions with the members opposite, they have decided to deal with motion 1 and motion 4. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I also suggest that the House suspend at this time for tea?
this House is now suspended until 5:15.